You're listening to Zoom the TBT with Charge and Hayner.
Hey guys, it's Charge Hayner representing Zoom the TBT, and tonight we got one more game of 21. I want to go ahead and welcome our guests. We got Chris Vosters, Matt Martucci, and Tim Scarborough. Gentlemen, what's going on tonight?
What's up? What's up?
Okay, and we're going to get right into it with one round of buy or sell. Okay, first question. We'll start with Chris, in fact. Chris, buy or sell? A double-digit seed will make Dayton. Go ahead.
I'm absolutely going to buy that. I mean, it's kind of like picking, when you fill out your bracket for March Madness in late winter, early spring, it's just like picking a double-digit seed to make the Sweet 16. Every year, every NCAA tournament, there's always, I think, even several double-digit seeds that become trendy in terms of advancing to the Sweet 16. And I think TBT 2021 is absolutely going to roll out just like that. I think put it this way, I think there's going to be a UCLA or an Oregon State, maybe even an and/or situation this year. Maybe even you get multiple double-digit seeds to Dayton and the regional semifinal. But just look at how many great double-digit seeds there are to note. I have it on record, certain folks in the TBT bracket selection pool admitting that Kimchi Express is a little bit underseeded. Have you guys looked at Heartfire's roster? I mean, they seem loaded for any number seed, let alone a double-digit seed. Team DRC in the West Virginia Regional Category 5, Tubby Time. I mean, even the 116 matchups, I think, have got a lot of intrigue. So I'm absolutely buying a double-digit seed is going to make it to Dayton.
Chris raises a good point there, but we have to mention, though, Kimchi is almost certainly underseeded at number 12. Probably one of the worst underseedings of the bracket might be TNT at 5. So that's a Titan-on-Titan matchup in the very first round. Good points all, Chris. Matt, same question to you. Buy or sell? A double-digit seed will make Dayton.
It's going to be a hard buy for me. And I'll even tell you, not only will it be a double-digit seed, I'm going to give you it's going to be one of the 415 seeds. That ends
Whoa!
Up either going to be we have Jackson Underdogs, we have X-Pates, the Patriot League alumni. Who else do we have? Woco Showtime, who Tim Scarborough and I are really familiar with from a couple of years ago. Like where was it? Scar down in Richmond, I guess. We had those guys. Yeah. Richmond.
Yeah. Get your popcorn ready.
Yeah, where Marcus Posley came in and played for those guys, and they ended up picking up a win. I love that Showtime squad. Lee Skinner getting all those guys together, the Presley brothers. They're a well-oiled machine. They're a bunch of guys that love to play pickup. Well-organized bunch. So I think potentially it's not only going to be a double-digit seed, it's going to be one of those 15s. And this is a preview. I think you can already get where I'm going to go here. Jackson Underdogs. I know there's no more Jalen Barford, but how are these guys a 15? How is that possible?
Because there's no Jalen Barford.
Stop. There's got to be more than that. That's disrespectful to the rest of that.
They don't have a professional on their team, too.
I know.
Not one.
So he was the glue that held everything together. Fine.
He did it.
It's still going to be a 15 seed. A 15 seed will get to Dayton. Give me a 15.
Okay. He's sitting on 15, which you're not supposed to do in Vegas. Tim, what do you think? Buy or sell a double-digit seed?
My two guys, they're both play-by-play guys. I work with both those guys. But I would tell you, they get most of their knowledge from me, the analyst. And let me tell you something. I disagree with my colleagues. I don't think there's going to be anybody lower than a 9 in Dayton. Remember, we're talking the last 8. We're not talking the 16. You're saying a 12 or 11 or a 10 is going to beat some of these top seeded teams in the first earlier rounds. I just don't think it's going to happen. Now, listen, I have the Volunteers in my final 8 in Dayton, but the Volunteers are a 9 seed, and that's the lowest one I have. But you guys mentioned it. There are a few that are eligible or could kind of sneak in. I think of Kimchi Express that we talked about. There's no Rob Gray on that TNT team. So they potentially could get upset, but I don't think they will. But GM Daniel Chunder's done a decent job of putting that squad together. Trey Davis, Gavin Schilling from Michigan State. And, of course, Tooch, you're very familiar with Trey Davis being at UMass covering Atlantic 10. Bleed Virginia, Matt Shelton.
Yeah.
Former VCU Ram Nation. He's
and
really
the social media
really nice
darling
team together.
of the day,
yeah,
obviously.
He's going through some things right now, right? but Marcus Evans, Reggie Williams, Chandre Jones. I mean, they have some guys that can put in the bucket. And then the buccaneers, speaking of buckets, Trey Boyd, AJ Merriweather. I think those guys. And then they have Justin Toyo, who used to play at VCU in Chattanooga, a big man. So, you know, a lot of those guys played for Steve Forbes at ETSU and won a ton of games. They're winners. They have a chance. But having said all that, again, we're talking the last 8 teams. I just don't think there'll be a double-digit seeded team lasting in Dayton.
Are there any other names you're going to drop, by the way?
It's a long show. He's got
I'm the analyst. That's what we do.
Plenty of time to drop more.
My job is much tougher.
That was everybody on every double-digit seeds roster, right there.
He's like, I love all these people, but screw you, you're not winning.
And by the way, you're not going to Dayton.
Exactly.
And by the way, so I think this is year 5 for us, Scar.
Yeah.
Folks at home may or may not be familiar with the Scarborough curse. So anybody inside of a 9 right now, you're totally screwed.
Listen. Chris is like
I got my bracket.
Challenge,
and I'm filming it out. That
challenge,
was a preview
challenge
right there.
ALS. Challenge ALS ended up getting a dagger to the neck early on.
I've been pretty hard on Team Arkansas too. I'm staying away from those guys.
So this is worth mentioning though. You did mention Volunteers, which are one of the teams that's probably one of the more underseeded teams, which means you just put Carmen's Crew on very serious upset notice. Moving along, let's start with Matt on this one. Buy or sell? You can have too much talent and not enough role players.
No, I'm gonna buy on this one, big time. Simply because, I mean, and I'll go back to the example of we talked about Jalen Barford and Jackson Underdogs. You know, that was a team that I felt like was tailor-made for TBT based on their roster, where, you know, you had one guy who was a big-time centerpiece, and then essentially, you know, you had a bunch of guys that were familiar with one another from playing pickup. You had one centerpiece surrounded by a bunch of role players, and they were particularly successful. Is there such a thing as too much talent? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Too many cooks in the kitchen. How many shots, you know, are there to go around potentially for a certain roster? I love, as a Syracuse alum, had to get that out of the way, by the way. I love Boeheim's Army, but that's a lot of shots to go around among a lot of dudes that like to shoot the ball. Tyrese Rice likes to score the ball. DJ Kennedy likes to score the ball. DeAndre Kane is, you know, self-proclaimed. I think he would tell you, big-time alpha male. There are going to be a lot of alphas on that roster. How do you find a way to potentially coexist? So they're kind of I think the poster child for it. You know, do you have potentially too much talent? I don't know. As an Orange alum, I kind of hope they prove me wrong. But I think they would be one of the first teams that potentially come to mind when I think about, you know, it's just a ton of talent, and there might be a little bit of role ambiguity there in terms of who does what, who's supposed to do what in a late game situation.
That's interesting enough. Yeah. Fair point you're bringing up, because that's one of the teams that comes to mind. But I will say this about Kennedy and Kane, having been on Overseas Elite, they will slip into role if needed because they are professionals. They know how to win. So that's a fair case, but that might work out in their favor. Yeah.
They've won.
Tim, same question to you. And they have won a lot.
Yeah.
Tim, you can have too much talent, not enough role players. Go.
They've won $7 million, fellas. I think they know how to finish games. But I tell you what, again, I have to disagree with my man Tooch. It's a buy for me. I think Tooch did actually say it's a buy.
I said it's a buy.
Have too much talent. Okay, so I agree with you, Tooch. So, you know, I think of Ram Nation 2018, 2019. And, you know, they ran the Overseas Elite. They just couldn't get over that hump. But it was more than that. I think they were good enough to win, but they had too many cooks in the kitchen, as Tooch just said. Briante Weber, Eric Maynor, Brandon Rozelle, Darius Theas, Reggie Williams. All those guys need the basketball in their hands, right? And in the end, it kind of came back to bite them. I think of Tim Thomas's team in 2018 in Brooklyn. Tim Thomas jettisoned his whole team. He had too many guys on his talent pool because he bought a whole new roster the night before the game. So again, and they got rolled. He paid like $2,000 per player. But you know,
in Brooklyn,
Tim Thomas
and beautiful Brooklyn.
Tim Thomas money. Yeah, in Brooklyn, I did those games, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that was a waste of money. But you know, I'm sure he doesn't miss it. But you know, I believe 10 reliable guys is usually, and I say reliable because you got to make sure the guys are showing up. You got to make sure they don't have other commitments or they have contracts going on. But if you can get 10 guys that you know are going to show up and play, I think that's the ideal number. Maybe carry 11 just in case somebody doesn't show up. But yeah, you can definitely have too much talent in TBT.
Fair enough. And moving to Mr. Vosters, too much talent, not enough role players. Buy or sell?
Well, Tim's definitely right that as play-by-play guys, we definitely get all of our information from analysts for sure. So I'll second him on that, and I'll also second him and Matt. I'm buying this one as well, and I think Boeheim's Army is just absolutely the case in point when you try and tackle this hypothetical. I mean, who's going to start? Who's going to play the Elam ending? And again, it kind of gets at the identity of what Boeheim's Army is all about. I mean, they have been proudly a Syracuse only. I think, last year was the first year that they had one player on their team who was not from Syracuse, but this year it's really kind of a hodgepodge. And I mean, even in the coaching ranks as well, Ryan Blackwell going from head coach to assistant coach. I mean, that's kind of an awkward dynamic for me. So, Boeheim's Army does such a great job publicizing their team every year. That's why they're one of the great TBT institutions. And so we're getting that roster, kind of thrown in our face a lot. And it really is a talented roster. And I think they do have an argument that it's the most talented roster on paper that a TBT team has ever seen. But I don't think that necessarily translates to a win and the $1 million prize in Dayton. And just look at last year. I know that there were a lot of extenuating circumstances related to COVID that I don't think are really going to be factors this year. But I don't think anyone would have said Sideline Cancer was the most talented roster in TBT last year. Now, they were certainly generating a buzz and had a really good team, of course. But even if you look at the champions from the last 2 years, Golden Eagles and Carmen's crew, I mean, I think you can argue that they probably did have the most talented rosters in those particular tournaments. But talent alone, look, I mean, all 64 teams have talent on their side this year. You need something more than that. And I think looking at the last two champions in particular, Golden Eagles and Carmen's crew had really good chemistry in addition to the talent that they had. And I think a lot of that came from playing with each other, or at least sharing that alma mater bond. And Boeheim's Army is just going all in on talent. I understand that. And, I certainly think that they've got a good chance to win the whole tournament. But, I'm a little bit skeptical that just putting together a super team is the golden ticket to win this thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up with Sideline too, because a guy like Eric Thompson, who does all that dirty work to spring Keen, to spring Abel, to spring all those guards who hit shots, having that Mo Creek.
Army,
Yeah, exactly. Who's going to be the guy that sets screens? Will it be Chris McCullough? Will it be Tyler Lydon? I'm not sure. What happens when they need someone to set? Yeah, and Matt's like, I don't know. Tyler Lydon likes to shoot.
Yes, he does. I mean, I love Tyler Lydon, but
great stretch five. Great stretch five. So the question becomes is what chemistry experiment blows up in someone's face, basically. So it's a fair point. Okay, so let's move it along a little bit. Let's start with Tim this time. Mr. Scarborough, buy or sell? Yes, due to COVID and a short season, youth and depth will be more important than skill and experience in this TBT.
Listen, that's a hard sell for me. And you mentioned youth and depth. Depth really doesn't matter because these are shorter games. They're 36 minutes and really not even that. There's 32 minutes. They take out the last 4 minutes to play the Elam ending. So you don't need a lot of depth in TBT to get through. And you get days off in between sometimes. That's just not an issue. And then youth, I never want youth. Now that I'm an old guy, don't give me some veterans, man. Give me a team that knows how to play and still have enough energy to play to match that youthful experience, but they understand how to spend their energy wisely and they're not just out there running around. And there's a lot of good veteran teams. Now, don't give me a team that's too old. And that's one of the reasons why I picked the Volunteers. I kind of think that Carmen's crew team aged out a little bit in 2020. You really saw them. Of course, they had just won $2 million the year before, so they maybe weren't as hungry for it as they could have been, and maybe they get that rekindled. But, the Golden Eagles, the returning champions now, I believe they're the oldest team in TBT. So I don't want you to be too old. I think they're skewing about 35, 36 average. They got guys in their mid to late 30s, and I think Travis Dieners will be 137 in March. So, I mean, it's kind of like they may age and experience may catch up with them, but for the most part, give me a team that is veteran laden and understands how to win. And that's why I disagree with my two colleagues about Boeheim's overseas elite army. I think that team is going to be
Boeheim's elite.
Boeheim's elite. There you go. I think that team is going to end up having the perfect amount of chemistry, and they'll figure it out because they do have pros that know how to play.
Fair enough. Let's go to Chris. The same question. Due to COVID in a short season, youth and depth will be more important than skill and experience in this TBT.
I'm selling this, gents. The pandemic is over, baby, and it's a new morning in America. Look, I mean, all kidding aside, if there was going to be a tournament that was affected by COVID, I think it would have been last year. And without a doubt, last year's tournament had COVID fingerprints all over it. I mean, we saw Eberline drive back out even after getting into the bubble. Best Virginia, unfortunately, was pulled from the tournament before it began. So, certainly not to downplay any of that, but the fact that we still had a tournament last year, and not only that, the level of play was as high as it was. Having watched the sport of basketball at various levels over the course of the last 12 months since TBT in the bubble in 2020, guys have been training. Men and women have been traveling. People have been getting in the gym again. I think, humans are pretty adaptable, and I think pretty quickly found ways to, again, get back into the gym and really not lose a whole lot on their game. So I think, again, if anything, that youth and depth, while important, is going to take a back seat to skill and experience, especially in a tournament like this. And that's not to take anything away from the first-time teams, because one thing that I'm seeing a lot as I look at rosters of some of the new teams, a lot of them have a key veteran who's played on other TBT teams in the past. And I think that is really an acknowledgement of how much experience can help you in terms of navigating these really short games, in terms of figuring out how to play the Elam ending. So I'm definitely selling this, and I understand that COVID is still in the background, but I'm just happy that we're trending in the right direction and getting to do this once again.
As we all are, Chris. Matt, same question to you. Due to COVID in a short season, youth and depth will be more important than skill and experience in this TBT.
I'm going to follow up Scarborough's point, by the way, and say he was looking for stretch at the Y old before pickup, not geriatrics old.
Oh, okay. Not like me with the icy hot on the knees.
We need to clarify. Yeah, stretch at the Y before pickup old, not geriatrics old.
Okay.
This is going to be a hard sell for obvious reasons stated by the two gentlemen already. But in addition, 2 words: Elam ending. You have to know how to play this thing. And for guys that are young and first timers at this tournament that haven't played in this thing, in some cases, knowing how to play that can potentially be a rude awakening. If you don't now how to approach that, what your strategy is going to be, when you get to under 4 minutes and trying to figure that out. So I think just having a handful of veterans that have been there before, having been here before, I think it's paramount. If you look at our past champions, I mean, overseas elite, case in point, Carmen's crew, another one. Even teams when you get down to like sideline cancer, not all those guys have necessarily been together, in all of the time that they've been here, but they have guys that have been in this thing for a long time and know how to play those final few minutes and those final few buckets exactly how they're supposed to. So I think just for the reason of the Elam ending more than anything, that's where veteran leadership ends up winning out in this thing. You have to know how to play it, and if you don't approach it the wrong way, you're going home. And it's not to the exit hotel anymore. You just go straight home this year.
Do not pass go. Do not collect $1 million.
Do not have Dan Friel lead you over to the hotel across the street. Just get out. Get on a plane. You're going to the airport. See ya.
Peace. You're out. Brutal. Like, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. All right, Chris, moving it along. One last buy sell for our first round of the game. A protected top 4 seed will lose in the first round. Buy or sell?
Yeah, I'll be really interested to hear what the rest of the panel has to say about this. And I know it's kind of an interesting counterpart to our earlier question to start the show when we talked about double-digit seeds potentially advancing all the way to the Elite Eight. And at the risk of sounding contradictory, I'm gonna sell this actually and say that we're gonna have the top four seeds get through their first round matchups, and there are going to be some really good first round matchups, even in the 116, 215, etc. But just doing a cursory glance of the bracket, I mean, the top four seeds in each region are just so good. I mean, I don't see Eberline Drive or the LA Cheaters or Carmen's Crew or Team Heinz, zip them up, for instance. I just don't see these teams having a hiccup, if for no other reason, because of their past tournament experience. I've been following the show a lot, and certainly it seems like in TBT circles, the trendy upset pick is somewhere around Team DRC over Heard That, which would be a 14 over a 3. And Team DRC is a really good team. Scar and Tooch, maybe you saw them in 2019 on their run in Richmond. But look, for all of the skepticism that is surrounding Heard That for capturing lightning in a bottle last year and being America's darlings, and now going from the hunter to the hunted, they've still got John Elmore and Ja'Cory Williams on their team, plus playing in Charleston, which is effectively a home game for these guys. I mean, Ott and John Elmore live 8 minutes from the Civic Center in Charleston. And with the fans that I'm assuming are going to be in the Civic Center supporting the... Did
you just dox the Elmores?
No, within 8 minutes.
Ott's on the record.
8 minutes.
Ott's on the record. He was on ZoomTheTBT.
I'm finding their house.
Yeah, he actually said he was within 8 minutes. We actually asked him to stay in his own bed. He didn't dox him.
He and he loves the attention anyway, so he's good.
He is a showman. Ott is a showman.
It was the Charleston Rec Center, right, where it all started. I believe it was the Charleston.
That's where the legend begins.
The Charleston YMCA. John, I'm gonna get a text from John after this.
Yeah, right. I know.
He'll be like, "No, it wasn't the Y. It was such and such."
It was Crunch Fitness or some nonsense. Chris,
it was curves.
Curves for men. Got you. So Chris, of a hard sell for very good reasons. Matt, question to you: a top four seed will lose in the first round.
Yes, I'm going to buy. I'm a hard buy. There is a little bit of extra motivation in one of these top four matchups, and I'm going to go down to the Illinois region in Peoria, the 4 versus the 12. Team Always Us, new addition, Oregon alumni. There was talk that it was only going to be, I believe, Dana Altman guys, and then they ended up letting the Ernie Kent crew in there. So you have kind of a mixture, a meld of two different factions, I guess.
Did they pollute the talent pool?
I don't know. But it's not even necessarily that. So that's one side. That's one side of the potential coin. The other side is SCD Hoops, playing for a good cause. Obviously, Billy Garrett, was I believe the first NBA player with sickle cell. Delroy James, I believe is either going to play or that.
We muted him there because I hate to do it to Max. Matt's great, but we said top four. SCD is playing a 5 seed in autism. We'll go ahead and unmute you once you learn to read. If you learn to read, he's making a face. We're going to unmute him now. We're going to unmute him.
And follow directions.
Go ahead, Matt. Unmute yourself. We can't hear you screaming. I don't know what language you're speaking.
You got to unmute yourself.
I'm looking at the bracket. Are they not a?
They're playing a 5. They're playing a 5.
Oh God! Are you kidding me?
Hey,
but
we get on national
race.
TV next week too. You got to tighten
you know
it
what?
up.
No. Sorry. So no, you know what? It still applies though. It still applies. So they're in the 12-5. But you know what? That's fine. I can totally backtrack here.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I will.
I'm making a trade. I'll take Chris Vosters.
I will
trade Matt Martucci to.
Go ahead, Matt.
The Philadelphia 76ers have traded Mikal Bridges to the Phoenix. Okay. I will adjust.
You were saying Always Us versus All Stars, which is 413. Go ahead, please.
I screwed it up.
You're fine.
No, I looked at the bracket. I looked wrong at the bracket. Looked at the bracket wrong.
Now that you've seen it right,
Now
Set the
that
record
I've seen
straight.
it correctly, Willie Williams and the Peoria All-Stars. Local factor. There might be a little bit more pressure to potentially play in front of the home crowd. But Scar and I saw those guys a year ago. They were basically, it seemed like assembled overnight. When they ended up being one of the substitute
They
teams.
were
One of the substitute teams in the bubble, and still ended up putting together what was a pretty impressive day. So
yeah.
home in front of the home crowd, team that has been there before, and playing against the team of guys that are essentially brand new to TBT. So I have rescued my argument from the depths. We have brought it back, Undertaker and Paul Bearer style.
You're back on my team. You're back on my team. You're back in my booth.
Peoria All-Stars.
Here is ours. Matt is selling it, naming names. Chris was selling it, and Matt was buying it. Tim, break up the tie.
So I got to break the tie.
Top 4 seed will lose in the first round.
STD Hoops is going to beat him in the second round anyway. It doesn't even matter.
Despite Matt Martucci really not being on top of things right now, I'm going to go with Matt Martucci and say, bye. There will be a 13-4 specifically. It's going to be, are you ready for this? Brown and white over Team Hines in Columbus.
Oh.
I'm calling it right now. I'm not Barkley, so I can't do the guarantee, but that's as close as a guarantee as I'm going to give you right now. Here's the reason. No Mike James. Mike James is with the Brooklyn Nets now. No Nick Calathis potentially. His team is fighting to get into the Olympics. He just got Greece into the final round, and he's their best player. There's no way if they make the Olympics, he's stopping that to go to TBT. And, Chris, when you're doing the Olympics, give Nick Calathis a shout out for your boy.
I will. I got you.
And then
actually, you should tell Fran to do that.
Tell Fran, Fran for sure. And then you think about, I had some other ones going, and I thought about mental toughness, LA Cheaters, but Casper Ware and Derek Williams would have to show up with a hyperextended knee like Giannis Antetokounmpo for that team to beat the LA Cheaters. The Cheaters are here to play this year. They're representing. I almost picked it because mental toughness did have a pretty solid team put together, but the 13-4 upset specifically, brown and white in Columbus. Be there.
I love it. Give me Birdman. Everybody thinks Birdman is Chris Anderson. They're wrong. Demetrius Conger is Birdman.
And for the record, brown and white is
Nation could tell you
St. Bonaventure. Yes, St. Bonaventure alum. Well-coached group, and you know this as good as anyone, Matt. Mark Schmidt is one of the best Division I coaches in the country. His teams are always prepared. No one wants to go to St. Bonaventure to play, not just because of the weather, because you get treated very poorly there as a visiting team. They ball out night in and night out. I'm picking that brown and white team to get together. They got all the talent from the most recent teams. They're going to be ready.
So Tim is buying the Bonnies. And that closes out. I will say one thing, that one thing wasn't mentioned, just for a side note, is even though Challenge ALS is much more talented, this is the best team WeAreD3 has had in their world coach. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that's what I'm keeping an eye on in Wichita. So, gentlemen, great first segment. We're doing wonderful. We'll take a quick break, come back for segment number 2.
Next segment, our panel plays the second round of TBT 21 on ZoomTheTBT with Charge and Hainer.
Hey guys, Charge and Hainer present ZoomTheTBT, and we're back with our second segment of 21, and we're going to get right into it, gentlemen. Matt Martucci, which first round matchup are you most looking forward to?
Well, guys, it's not like we aren't doing this again, but we're going to go to Columbus and go to the 6-11 matchup. I love the nerd team. I love Blue Collar U, simply because of a lot of the optics. The nerd team, made up of a bunch of former Ivy League guys. Amir Bell's on that squad, a guy whose games I did a little bit when Princeton would come and play St. Joe's. Just feel like there are a lot of high IQ basketball guys. Obviously, being the nerd team, it's not just it's a catchy name. I love them. Love Buffalo and everything that they've assembled. CJ Massenberg was a name that I became pretty familiar with during the Nate Oates Buffalo team runs. Back when he was still there, before he ended up taking the money and heading to Bama. So I love that matchup simply just because of rosters. And I think it could potentially be a hell of a game. Scoring of, a Buffalo team that likes to get up and down the floor, push the pace against kind of the brains and brawn of the nerd team.
I think it's a great pick, Matt. Definitely. Tim, the question to you: which first round matchup are you most looking forward to?
He doesn't even need to look at his bracket.
I don't need to look at it. We don't need no stinking brackets. Listen, I'm going to be in Charleston, West Virginia. So the answer is all the games that start in Charleston, West Virginia on Saturday, July 17th, because I cannot wait. This is fun. This is great. I'm in my office. I got my little podcast microphone, but it's nothing like being at the stinking game, calling it with guys sweating, and you can hear the cursing in the conversations. And I got my man, Matt Martucci, sitting next to me. This is going to be exciting. All those first round games. Now, let me get specific because there are some really good first round games going on around the country in your neck of the woods. We think about the Buccaneers. That is the hardest name to get. Buccaneers versus War Ready. The ETSU guys versus, which is Auburn, pretty much an Auburn team now. They retooled. Pretty much everybody on that War Ready team is from Auburn. And I live in Atlanta. I've seen all these guys in practice. I've seen them in games. They went to the Final Four. Simeon Bowers and guys like that hanging around. TJ Dunnins, TJ Lang. They got a lot of talent, but that Buccaneers team is going to be really good as well. So that matchup is good. Team Arkansas, Eberline, Challenge ALS, BAM's Overseas Elite Army. I want to see all those teams in their first round matchups. I can't wait for this thing to get started.
Scar just wants to watch the field.
I think that's fair. And Scar raised a good point about the Georgia thing with War Ready. A little known fact, they're playing one of those scrimmage games against one of the TBT hopefuls of the past, the Georgia Kangaroos in Atlanta. Yep. So they're actually getting ready to play right now in Atlanta very soon.
I'll be there for that one.
Are you going to be there?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I will be in the gym.
Yeah, they actually reached out to us about giving us tape and talking about the scrimmage, which we might take him up on. So, Chris, first round game. What do you think?
I'm also going to go to Columbus, and look, I've I think showed my hand to you guys enough as we've done these shows
as a company man,
spring and into the summer. So I'm a big college basketball fan, and I really love the 8-9 matchup in Columbus between Men of Mackey versus the Volunteers. That's Purdue alumni team versus Tennessee alumni team. I tell you what, I would really love to be with Hainer watching that game to see how triggered he gets cheering against a Tennessee alumni team, being the Memphis homer that he is. Then on top of that, it's just a great matchup because you have two outstanding alumni bases. Both teams are loaded. I can't believe it's the 8-9 matchup. Absolutely a quality of enough matchup to see in the third round or even later. But I'll take it as a first round matchup, and I'm really excited to see it.
I am definitely agreeing hard with Chris here, Matt. Yeah.
Big Ten Network, give this man a raise.
Absolutely.
Give him
good
a
company
raise.
Man. He's a good company man. Good company man, but he's not wrong. That I think what's great about that, it goes to our question we'll have later, is like that seeding of that matchup is absurd. Like it's prima facie absurd. Like it doesn't even make any sense. So 8-9, like that's I don't know. We'll get into that later, but that strikes me.
And Carmen's crew has to play them in the second round.
And they got the hardest 16s, and not the Mid-American Community is not your normal 16 seed. It's a team. So that quad is an absolute fucking nightmare. But I digress. We're going to move it ahead. And it goes to our next question, actually. Let's go to Tim first here. So, Tim, which region is the most difficult?
I think that's one of the easiest questions of the night. It's clearly Wichita. Again, we talked about their top 6 teams. I believe all 6 of them are good enough to win it all. TNT, Team Arkansas, of course, Eberline, Challenge ALS. They are all good enough to win it all. And one of them probably will, because they will have gone through, whoever survives that bracket is going to be well-positioned and battle-tested to win this whole thing. But for me, it's very easy. That Wichita region is stacked, and there's going to be a lot of good basketball being played out there.
To quote Ron Burgundy, Knights of Columbus that hurt.
Knights of Columbus
that hurt.
So, Chris, what region is the most difficult, and why is Tim wrong?
Well, there's definitely not a weak region by any stretch, but To me, Wichita was maybe the weakest. I know that's a harsh word, but I thought it was the weakest of the four, to be honest with you. And I look at Columbus. I think Columbus is absolutely stacked, and the added intrigue is that you've got so many teams with Ohio connections. I mean, it's even hard to pinpoint. I know Dayton hopes to get to the championship rounds or for championship weekend because they'll be the host. But I mean, with it being in Columbus, you've got Carmen's Crew, you've got Mid-American Unity, you've got Brown and White, you've got not Brown and White, but Ohio U, excuse me.
Yeah,
Zip them up. Yep. So there are a ton of teams with Ohio connections, and then again, just even beyond the top six, like, you know, Wichita's got a great top six, but I think the depth in Columbus is also really darn good. We talked about that 8-9 matchup between Men of Mackey and Volunteers. You've got the money team in that region. You've got Team Hines in that region. Matt really likes that blue collar U team, that Buffalo team. They've got a lot of NCAA tournament experience on that team. How about another great college basketball alumni matchup that not many people are talking about between NC State and Miami in Wolfblood
ACC battle?
5. Great stuff. So, you know, I think Columbus top to bottom is absolutely loaded and completely up for grabs.
Matt, these are both good picks. Let's get yours. Which reason is the most difficult?
I think I'm just going to argue either Wichita or West Virginia simply because I had Columbus. More than, I mean, Vosters basically just took it. It's loaded top to bottom. Carmen's Crew, it feels like has every good player from Ohio State pretty much in like the last 10 to 15 years jammed into one roster, and that's why they're there essentially, you know, almost every year. You know, that's why they've been a team that we've talked about now for the last couple of years, and who, you know, eventually did end up getting over the hump. Men of Mackey, they're fun, you know, not only because they're a Purdue alumni team, but they're also, I believe, the only team in the tournament that has 2 7-footers on its roster. We tend to talk about TBT as being a pretty guard-heavy, guard-dominant tournament. I'll be interested to see, you know, kind of how they decide to play. You know, if they end up playing more inside out, if it ends up being more guard-dominated, or how they decide to approach that. Volunteers, love the Fighting Chris Loftons. I'm old enough to remember. I'm old enough to remember when Chris Lofton and Joe Forte went shot for shot in the Sweet 16.
Joe Forte,
NCAA tournament.
Wow.
Sweet 16 in the Sweet 16 at the NCAA tournament, and Ron Slay was talking all kinds.
Who won that duel?
Carolina went to the Final Four that year.
And how many times has Tennessee been in the Final Four?
0.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Matt.
You don't count the Lady Vols. You don't count the Lady Vols.
Not for this conversation.
Michelle Marciniak took them like every year she was there, baby. You didn't know I knew about the Lehigh Valley. Allentown Central Catholic's finest, Michelle Marciniak.
There we go.
Anyway, Columbus region though, top to bottom. You know, this has been a trendy pick for our show, and you know, I'm a good company man myself. I love Brown and White. There's so much talent on that team. There is a particular college basketball analyst who will remain nameless who always says, Mark Schmidt, more with less. And that's what Schmidt does. The mayor of O-Town gets the most out of his guys.
2 mentions in one show for Mark Schmidt. That's got to be a record.
And there we go. They call Ole in New York O-Town.
There we go.
They'll love that. Mayor of O-Town, Mark.
I don't even know where that is. How far north of Brooklyn is it?
No one does.
Basically, you fly into Buffalo and then you drive an hour and a half.
That sounds delightful.
That's a great itinerary.
But you know what?
I'm not doing that.
The beer is just as cold there as it is anywhere else.
There you go.
And a lot seems like too, I bet.
Okay, so moving along, gentlemen, let's go back to Mr. Vosters. So which seed and or snub in the TBT was the most perplexing to you?
You know, so I guess at the risk of being a little bit redundant here, you know, I think one thing that was a little bit of a head scratcher for me was giving Boeheim's Army the 3 seed, just because of how loaded their roster is. I do actually think, having thought about it a little bit, that 3 seed in the Peoria regional actually sets Boeheim's Army up pretty well for a run if they can get everything together. I know they'll have to hit House of Pain. They might have to hit Golden Eagles in Dayton, but they just got to be in the top 2, I guess, to get to championship weekend. And so actually, I also think that another advantage for Boeheim's Army having that 3 seed in Peoria is that they don't have the off weekend in between regionals. So, a team conceivably could get on a roll that second weekend and just carry it right on through to Dayton. I'll go back to a matchup that I already highlighted, and Hainer, you kind of touched on it. I don't understand why Men of Mackey is in the 8-9 matchup in Columbus. And you just look at the bracket as a whole and compare it to last year. Men of Mackey as a first-year team was in the TBT bubble last year, and deservedly so. That was a good team last year. It was really hard to get into that field because of the reduced size, but Men of Mackey, I think, was the 15 seed in the tournament, maybe the 16 seed last year, right in the middle.
19, yep.
19. Okay, 19. Mm-hmm. So 19.
Yeah.
They're an 8 seed this year with a 64 team field. So to me, I think Men of Mackey got better, namely with the addition of Robbie Hummel. That's a huge addition. One of the biggest pickups, I think, in TBT history to get a player of that caliber. Now, they do lose Justin Dentman, who was their X factor in a lot of ways last year. That's a big loss, but I still think Men of Mackey got better from last year to this year, and it seems like they actually got docked in the overall seeding if you were to rank or rate the entire field 1 through 64, and especially if you compare the seedings of other teams who were in the bubble last year and are in the tournament again this year. No one really got pinged like that. So again, I don't understand why Men of Mackey got a seed that low. That's definitely a head scratcher for me, not only to play the Tennessee alumni team in the first round, but then even if they win that, as Scar already mentioned, you got to play Carmen's crew in the second round. I mean, that is a tough and a tall order indeed. So that's the head scratcher that I got.
That's a pretty big head scratcher. I have to agree with a lot of that, Chris. It's pretty wild. So Matt, which seed in our snub was the most perplexing?
I'll just go with the snub, 20th and only.
Yeah.
Philly guy. Just more selfishly, I think, than anything, wanted to see those guys there. Plenty of guys with NCAA tournament experience that were on the Sweet 16 team, coached by our boy Dr. John Giannini. Tyrone Garland made the Southwest Philly floater basically a household name. Simply wanted to see those guys. They had competed in TBT before, have really good guard play, and their loss ended up being brotherly love's gain because Jarrell Wright and Steve Zach.
And Steve Zach
end up on that roster. But
and Steve and Wright and Zach really helped brotherly love because they never had true bigs, and now they have 2 of them that can really actually play basketball. So that brotherly love team is really.
They had that one big from Temple that was like a Temple transfer, whose name escapes me at the moment, but wasn't.
Why? Because he wasn't Steve Zach.
Because he wasn't. Yeah, I guess. And he liked to stand around the perimeter pretty much.
Right.
So
now you got guys that are going to go in there and bang.
Yeah,
not that Sammy Givens and Novar Gatson wouldn't, but now you got true bigs and you got some rim protection. So yeah, I like the way that team is put together.
That was a big snub. I was really shocked by too. It's good pick so far. Tim, weigh in. What seed in our snub was the most perplexing to you?
Seeding doesn't matter in TBT for the most part after you see the top 4 teams in each region. So I'm not going to deal with that. but the snub to me, obviously I could have picked 20th and I grew up on 18th and Stinton, which is about 5 or 6 blocks from there. So I've always loved LaSalle. But Gale Nation for me is the team that I thought was a shoo-in to get in. When you think about TBT over the years, your team fancies and your Gale Nations and Boeheim's Army, those are the teams that you think of, the Villanova team before they decided not to play anymore. But those teams that were in the Jamboree in 2017, 2016 in Philly, teams that have been around. Gale Nation fits that mold. You think about that game against Boeheim's Army where it was a 25-point swing with Harrison and Devendorf going back and forth and Steve Burt going back and forth. it was just an amazing team. I love that team. You have AJ English Jr., who scored 2,000 points at Iona. You have Steve Burt Jr., who not only did he score 2,000, but his dad, Steve Burt Sr., is the all-time leading scorer at Iona. And then you have Scott Machado.
Father-son duo, right? In D1.
Right. And you know, if Steph Curry had played another season, the Currys might have got him. I don't know. But Scott Machado, who's another close to 2,000 point scorer, I believe, you know, and all great pros. They had a really good team. And I feel bad for a GM, John Kiggins, who I was talking to him, you know, over the last few weeks, very excited about the team he was putting together. He had a couple bigs to add to that mix. And now they don't even get to play. And it's always interesting to me when the brackets come out, why someone doesn't call Steve Burt, AJ English, and Scott Machado. I thought that last year when a lot of teams didn't make it into the bubble because it went down from 64 to 25 and Gale Nation got shut out then. So to me, you know, Gale Nation should have been in this year, in my opinion. But you know, that's the biggest snub for me.
Maybe they did call and they all said no.
They said no.
We only want to play. We only want to play for the Fighting Tim Cluses, or in this case, the Fighting Patinos. The Fighting Patinos.
Slick Rick, everybody's favorite Italian sausage magnate. Okay, moving it right along. We got one more question prior to our final thoughts. We'll go ahead and start. We're going to start Chris here. Put you on the spot. Final question of the game. What is your TBT championship pick and why?
It's really tough. I mean, there are so many teams, again, just looking at the bracket that I think can win this thing. You know, at the risk of sounding unoriginal, I'm really, the more I look at their roster, the more I really still like Carmen's crew. And I know that they looked a little bit flat last year in the bubble.
Did you say fat? Did you say fat or flat?
FL.
Oh, okay.
Not PHAT either. Yeah.
You don't have to worry about this team's conditioning. All right.
Okay.
They're gonna be A-okay. I mean, these guys
are Big Ten guys. Vosters wants you to know that. These are Big Ten guys.
Thank you, Matt. I mean,
we get it. You work for the Big Ten network.
Matt's like taking the words out of my mouth. It's like he's in my head. He knows exactly what I'm thinking. It's crazy. But look, like you guys, I mean, come on. This roster is so solid. I mean, we all are college basketball fans here. We all know how good those David Lighty, Aaron Kraft, John Diebler era teams were. But here's the thing too. They're going to play so well together. They're not going to have any chemistry issues. And we talked way back at the beginning of the show about how not only do you have to have a talented roster, but you have to have guys that can fit certain roles. And this team is just so well-rounded. I mean, they've got like a Keyshawn.
Well coached.
They're well coached. I mean, I think Caleb Wesson could really be a dominant big man in this tournament. I think his size and his skill set really positions Carmen's crew well to work inside if they want to go that way. You know, they even got a guy like Jeff Gibbs, who's he reminds me of like a PJ Tucker. You know, he's like the TBT version of PJ Tucker. It's like,
analogy.
You know, he's built like a box, like great rebounder. You know, does the dirty stuff well. You know, so they've got size. I know the knock that I've heard against Carmen's crew most consistently is that they're a little bit long in the tooth, but I just don't think I don't think that's going to be a problem for these guys. They're playing in Columbus. They're going to have a huge fan base in the first round games. They're going to travel extremely well to Dayton when they get there, and I just think that the pieces are really there for Carmen's crew to go on a deep run. So I'm a big fan of their roster.
Their best big is the coach, though, right? Jared Sullinger.
And he can play, right? I mean, Hainer like can certainly, you know, he's got an ear to the ground better than anyone. But you know, I'm not looking at Carmen's crew like, oh, they're gonna have Sullinger and even Evan Turner lace up. But I mean, if they do, like,
no one's gonna stop them.
No, it's
no one's gonna stop them.
Like, you know, so
it's over. It's over. It's a wrap.
I do like Chris mentioning though that they're going to travel well to Dayton. I think they can walk to Dayton from Columbus. It's not that much of a trip. So Matt, that's a good pick. Carmen's is a fair pick. Matt, where are you going? What's your TB championship pick and why?
My TBT championship pick is also coming out of Columbus. But I think the theme of this year's TBT championship is, you know, teams that were here a year ago, but for whatever reason or another, some of their guys didn't get a chance to participate, or the team itself was in the bubble but didn't necessarily make it. So I'm going Team Hines coming out of Columbus. The return of Kyle Hines and Nick Calathis, I think makes a huge.
What if Calathis is in Japan? You still making that?
What if
big?
Hines doesn't show up?
Still doesn't matter. He's gonna come.
Okay.
He'll be, I'm banking.
You think
on
Mike James is walking through that door?
Maybe.
No.
He's got an NBA contract.
Team Hines and Everline Drive, capitalizing on the raw emotion and the feeling of a year ago.
So you putting that in Sharpie?
Getting there.
You putting that in Sharpie?
As much as your challenge ALS pick was a year ago.
Wow.
Okay, that's good.
Matt's tired of taking kicks. He goes to the jugular. Okay, so Matt has got Hines riding Calathis and Hines all the way to the title. Tim, clean us up. Who is your championship pick and why?
Listen, I've been an official picker of the brackets since I've been doing TBT, and I never come close. So beware
Curse.
who I pick right now. That Scarborough curse is about to get. Drum roll, please. Who is the Scarborough curse going to get this year? You know, to me, I'm going to jinx your boys, Tooch, your alma mater, the Boeheim's Overseas Elite Army. I think that team's going to win it all. I think they have all the talent for sure. I think there's no arguing that that's probably the most talented group put together. Where you have 3 NBA guys that are Syracuse guys, and then you add in DeAndre King and DJ Kennedy. So I think if they just decide to check egos at the door, there's no reason why these guys can't go ahead and count another $1 million.
They're gonna win this whole thing and go out in a glorious blown up chemistry experiment. They're either walking out
could
the
happen
title
too,
or blowing up. That's the only 2 ranges you have for Boeheim. Yeah,
They've
it's either gonna be
nothing.
$1 million or a disaster.
Going home first weekend.
Okay, gentlemen, this is a wonderful game. We've done well. I want to start with final thoughts. I will pass the ball to Matt now. Matt, closing thought for TBT right before we start. 1.5 weeks on the eve of the start. What are your final thoughts?
I think if you look at over the years at just the talent pool and the field and how much stronger it's gotten over the years, and you look at the level of competition, nothing speaks to how badly people want to win than guys jumping rosters. Specifically, look at Boeheim's Army snatching Tyrese Rice from the clutches.
Syracuse legend, Tyrese Rice.
ACC legend, because they had moved at that point. BC had, but snatching him from Challenge ALS, where I believe he stood in the wedding of one Sean Marshall. So decided basically to go in a complete opposite direction and be a mercenary essentially for Boeheim's Army. He he's retiring from Europe, his career. I think this is the end for Tyrese Rice. So he wants it. Like, who knows if this is his last TBT? I don't know the answer to that necessarily, but he's going all in. And I respect wanting to win this thing that badly that friendships potentially go out the window. Everything else goes out the window. You want that chip and you want your cut of that $1 million. So
Fair enough.
Kudos to Tyrese Rice.
There we go, Matt, giving the mercenaries love. Tim, what is your final TBT thought prior to us closing the show?
Well, my final thought this time is I am for a wholesale expansion of the TBT. Now, let me explain. I have it all laid out, okay? So we talked about some of those teams that didn't make it. Let's give them a chance to play themselves in. We've seen a little bit of this here in Atlanta. The Vic Beasley tournament that was played here in Atlanta.
Shout out to the Georgia Kings.
Hey, the Georgia Kings end up getting that spot, but Vic Beasley was the reason. He paid the $20,000 to say the winner of my tournament is going to get an automatic bid into TBT. That's a great idea, tremendous idea. It kind of reminds me of the way the NCAA is set up, right? Where you have your mid-majors playing one tournament, 12 teams. They play for one spot. And we know that team that won that tournament is automatically in to the NCAAs. We could do that in 4 regions in America. In the South, you could do it here in Atlanta. We're already doing it. In the East, you could do it in Richmond at VCU, get a nice crowd there in the Siegel Center. In the West, you got to do it in Vegas, right? And in the North, you could do it in Chicago. And then you have 8 teams to 12 teams playing for one spot. And those 4 teams get a $20,000 buy-in into the tournament. And by the way, Vic Beasley also gave the Georgia Kings $165,000 to win their tournament. And you can have dunk contests and 3-point contests like Vic Beasley did, and have the winners of those compete on the national level in the TBT. So I think it can be done. And then the thing that is crazy is that the Gale Nations of this world and the 20th and onlys would have had a chance to play their way into the tournament, which, you know, I would have loved to see those teams earn their spot since they got shut out. They never really got a chance to. And how would we get to see it? Put the whole thing on YouTube. And guess what? Chris Vosters is available in the summer. Tim Scarborough is available in the summer. Matt Martucci is available in the summer. Let's call these games, fellas. Who's with me?
I'll be your sideline reporter.
I'm with you 100%. Yeah.
I'm all in for TBT Survivor too.
Oh,
The top 8 snubs on the island, and you decide.
They battle it out.
Yeah, we decide who stays.
A battle of wits.
we can do this next summer. We can make a show. I'll do the sideline reporter. You guys can call the game.
Outplay, outlast.
When we see Dan in West Virginia, we'll pitch this idea to him. The 4 of us will just do it. So one last thing, Chris, what's your final thought about TBT in 2021?
I think along the lines of what Tim said about expansion of the tournament field. I mean, even more generally than that, I'm just really interested to see how the tournament continues to grow and expand, I guess, in other ways necessarily than not just how many raw teams are in it. For instance, the pot. Is the pot going to stay at $1 million? Is it going to go back to 2 million, maybe even continue to grow? Because I think that is a really compelling avenue to attract more top talent from overseas to come and play in this thing. It's interesting. A lot of the podcasts that I've listened to, even listening to a guy like John Flowers for Best Virginia, he's got a really good team. He's really been a great supporter for TBT with the West Virginia alumni team that he's put together. But I hear him talking about his schedule, wrapping up his overseas season in France, and right away launching into training camp for TBT. I mean, these guys don't have a lot of rest. They want to spend time with their families, and TBT, for better or for worse, is going to have to compete against that in a way. You've got to keep making this enticing and attractive for top talent to come back from overseas and want to play in this thing. You got to make it worthwhile. Another thing that I'm just really interested to see how this affects the structure of the tournament is how we've all talked about the Tyrese Rice move, and look, guys are getting paid now, regardless of whether or not your team wins the $1 million. I mean, you're starting to see some boosters for some of the wealthier teams or the teams with deeper pockets throw guys, 5-figure checks to just play this thing, whether or not you win or lose. So how is that going to perhaps create some imbalance in the scale? I mean, is a team like, I'm just picking a random team here, but how is primetime players going to keep up with a Boeheim's Army that's paying their guys, $10,000, $15,000 just to play? I'll be really interested to see how that affects the tournament, and then also just the seeding as well, because there are some and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. There are some politics that go into seeding the tournament right now. It's not strictly okay, who are the best teams? I mean, preference is given to teams that are hosting regionals, and that is deserved in a sense, because these are teams that have proven great TBT fan turnouts and have great followings and fan bases on social media and in person. But I think that there needs to be a little bit more standardization in terms of assigning seeds to just create a bracket that is based more purely on who the committee thinks the best teams are, more along the lines of the NCAA selection committee. There are always going to be questions. People are always going to say, well, my team should be higher and I should be playing here. But, I think more of an emphasis on just the pure X's and O's on court product as opposed to maybe like what the extraneous stuff is a direction that I'll be interested to see if the tournament goes over coming years.
So we talked to TBT here, we discussed the TBT, and we also, if we're talking about this, we fixed the TBT. And there ain't much to fix as the premier basketball event of the summer, but at the margins, there's always ways to improve it. And I want to thank my guests for helping that. Matt, Chris, Tim, thanks for swinging by our game of 21. This has been Charge and Hainer present TB. This has been Charge and Hainer present Zoom the TBT.
Hey, just real
signing
quick.
off. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hold on, before you sign off, Hainer.
I'm not signing off. Yeah,
you and Charge have done such a bomb job,
Oh.
especially this year, but in the past, like helping build the buzz for this, giving teams some publicity. I mean, I watch the show to get ready for my games. This is like a go-to resource. You guys are in the know and do a really good job. So thanks for all the hard work that you've put in getting ready for this thing, man. Shout out to you and Charge for sure.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Dude, we enjoy it so much that you're buying the first round next week.
We are.
Yes,
I am actually buying the first round next week. That is true, and that was what the payment was getting Chris to be nice to me. So, gentlemen, thanks again for swinging by. This has been Charge Hammers at Zoom the TBT signing off.
All right, guys. Peace.
Hope you enjoyed listening to Zoom the TBT with Charge and Hainer. Subscribe to YouTube, follow on Twitter, and give us your money.